This presentation offers a vision for the future of the Randall Preserve Ganges site. This meeting is your opportunity to learn about and explore the preserve and the connection to nature that it has to offer community members. Our meeting begins with the presentation, followed by an opportunity for you to ask questions and provide feedback. Thank you to the team members who supported this effort for their coordination, their collaboration, and cooperation in getting these plans out for public review. It truly has been a team effort. We would also like to acknowledge the generosity of several funders, including government agencies and foundations shown here. Their vision and support made possible the creation of the plans for the preserve. As you can see from the map, the preserve is located along the Orange County coastline at the edge of the cities of Newport Beach, Costa Mesa, and Huntington Beach. It is within these historic lands of several California Native American tribes whose ancestors walked the land and utilized its ecological bounty to live in harmony with nature. Its main entrance is at the terminus of 17th Street and Costa Mesa. Now let me pass the presentation over to Mike Sweesey with Dudek.
The goal of this meeting is twofold. We want to present to you an initial vision for the preserve through our ongoing planning process to develop the draft resource management plan, public access plan, and coastal resilience strategy. These plans will set the direction of the preserve management, how habitats are restored, where and how visitors will be able to go, what amenities will be available, and what activities visitors will be able to enjoy. At this meeting, we want to hear from you. Your input is critical to the collective voice of your community. Your ideas and desires will inform decisions in this planning process that will establish how the public will enjoy, learn from, and visit the preserve. What are the management priorities to improve ecological resources? And how will the public engage in these resources? The planning documents are now available for your review. We ask that you respond no later than Monday, July 14th. Response options are provided later in this presentation. For the past year, teams have been assessing the habitats and disturbance from 100 years of oil extraction to understand present-day conditions and to answer some basic questions about restoring the land. How can we support a diverse community of native plants and wildlife that occupied the site in historic times? How can we engage with local tribal governments and apply their traditional ecological knowledge? How can we create meaningful public use that allows community members to access the preserve for the pleasure and enjoyment of all while protecting the delicate ecology of this island preserve? We speak of an island because this is one of the last vestiges of the undeveloped wildland that predates our urban environment. As an island in the sea of urbanization, we must manage, protect, and nurture ecological communities to provide the stability that is needed to ensure a healthy ecosystem that is long-lasting. This planning process drafted 2 planning documents that describe a vision for the future of the preserve and guide the management of ecological resources and public access while weaving in tribal stewardship. These documents are now in draft form, including a resource management plan, which contains a chapter on the public access plan and coastal resilience strategy. The preserve is stewarded by the Mountains Recreation and Conservation Authority, MRCA, who is both the title holder and land manager. MRCA has a long history of resource conservation and land management throughout Southern California. As the title holder, MRCA accepted the property with certain requirements and designations on the stewardship and allowable uses of the land, such as open space conservation, passive recreation, public access, and wildlife and habitat preservation. These requirements are codified in the deed to the property. Generally, public uses will include forms of passive recreation like hiking, picnicking, wildlife observation, potentially primitive camping, and the general enjoyment of the landscape. The public access plan provides greater detail of the public access approach, trail system, public amenities, and access phasing. We especially encourage your ideas here. In addition to public access, MRCA is committed to a co-stewardship arrangement with local tribal governments to reestablish a connection with their ancestral lands. The ecological significance of the preserve cannot be underestimated within the urban fabric of Orange County. Although the oil field operations have diminished the ecological resources, it has also preserved core habitat areas for the past 100 years. Current oil field remediations are ongoing and will continue for the foreseeable future to address oil field pollution, retire oil field facilities, and restore selected areas of the preserve. This work is being done by the previous title holder, Era Energy LLC. No tax dollars are being used to fund this remediation work. Now I'll pass the presentation over to Cam Murray with Dudek.
As part of the system of lands and waters, the preserve is a major link to the Santa Ana River Trail, Talbot Regional Park, Huntington Beach Wetlands, and Sunset Ridge Park, among many others. The preserve is still home to many rare and endangered species, including California gnatcatcher, least Bell's vireo, and Belding savanna sparrow, as well as other sensitive species such as cactus wren and burrowing owl. Existing native vegetation communities serve as habitat for these wildlife populations. Numerous rare plants occur within the preserve that are not found anywhere else within coastal Orange County. While habitat has been degraded by oil field disturbance, the recovery of habitat presents an opportunity to increase ecological resources that will bring greater stability for wildlife populations and native plant communities. The site poses several constraints on habitat enhancement and restoration, and on public access that will require special attention and innovative design to reach preserve goals and objectives. Site constraints include abandoned subsurface oil wells, existing easements, electrical overhead utilities, and habitat mitigation areas. The Resource Management Plan is a high-level document that sets out a framework for land management in support of preserve management goals and objectives. The Resource Management Plan is one of several plans being drafted that must be intertwined and work together to balance public access with habitat protection and restoration of the overall preserve ecology, today and in future climate change scenarios. Key chapters describe existing conditions and resources, a management framework for decisions and actions to address past disturbances, a public access plan chapter that describes a phased approach to trails, overlooks, public use areas, and education, and adaptive management measures that address the protection of preserved features under future sea level rise scenarios. Importantly, the Resource Management Plan describes low touch or low intensity and high touch or high intensity management approaches to guide habitat improvements within the preserve. The Resource Management Plan describes management alternatives that are structured in a graduated series of management levels. These levels include low-touch concepts like weed suppression activities and intermediate touch options such as native seeding and restoring abandoned oil field roadways by decompacting soils and applying native seed. High-touch concepts include the most intensive management options, like installing nursery container plantings supported by temporary irrigation in the upland mesa areas, and transforming the lowland area through mass grading and the reintroduction of tidal exchange to establish native salt marsh vegetation communities. Implementing different management levels will occur within discrete management units to promote the transformation of degraded land into self-sustaining, diverse native habitats that foster wildlife. The low-touch approach focuses on weed treatment to suppress seed production, relying on passive volunteer revegetation of native plants. The intermediate touch approach focuses on restoring abandoned oilfield roads by decompacting soil and applying unirrigated native seed mixes. Restoring the existing roads on the preserve will reconnect habitat and reduce habitat fragmentation that resulted from oilfield operations. The high-touch approach uses mass grading to reshape and lower site elevations to allow tidewater to flood the lowland. Existing hydrology would redirect freshwater and saltwater inputs to support freshwater and saltwater habitats. Management within upland areas will restore coastal sage scrub, maritime cactus scrub, and native grasslands through passive and active approaches. These native vegetation communities are habitat for California gnatcatchers, cactus wren, and burrowing owl. This approach builds on core intact habitat areas by enhancing adjacent degraded native vegetation and establishing public trails, overlooks, and use areas. Over time, these upland management activities will knit together a self-sustaining native community that is ecologically diverse and dynamic. The objective of low and intermediate touch approaches in the lowland area is to revegetate native vegetation communities best suited for the existing conditions that include the preserve's unique terrain and freshwater and saltwater hydrology. Target vegetation communities include mealfat scrub and willow scrub, where freshwater influence is present, and high salt marsh vegetation in depressions where high salinity is sustained. Two salt marsh restoration concepts are presented in the resource management plan using a high-touch approach that would transform the existing modified lowland environment into a highly functioning tidal wetland. This builds coastal resilience and improves habitat and hydrological function. These vegetation communities promote and support wildlife species such as leaf-spell's vireo, Belding savanna sparrow, and Ridgway's rail. I will now pass this presentation to Liam Walsh with MRCA.
Thank you, Cam. MRCA has engaged with 7 local California Native American tribes through a tribal access and engagement plan. Though separate from this process, the actions and activities in this plan are interwoven into the RMP. A key goal is to reconnect tribal governments with lands they are culturally and ancestrally affiliated with. Historically, ancestors of local tribes lived within and were part of the ecological systems at the Randall Preserve. The conservation of the Randall Preserve presents an opportunity for code stewardship arrangements with local tribes to reestablish a human component of the historical ecological system and communities. Traditional ecological knowledge, in consultation with tribal governments, will be applied to restore the habitat and the overall ecology using techniques such as cultural burning and restoration of culturally significant native plants. These tribal uses will serve as a living example and educational opportunity for community involvement in the management of the Randall Preserve. Specific areas will be set aside for tribal ceremonial use that will have shared or no public use. I'll now pass this presentation to Gaurav Srivastava with Dudek.
The public access plan is housed within the resource management plan and describes a phased approach to create a network of trails, overlooks, and public use areas for the enjoyment of all visitors. This plan considers different transportation modes for arrival at the preserve. Upon arrival, visitors will gradually over time access various portions of the preserve in a phased opening of the trail system. Public amenities will include an arrival area with parking, restrooms, picnic tables, wayfinding signage, and educational information. From the 17th Street entrance, a system of trails will eventually access many areas of the preserve that may in the future connect to external public spaces and features such as Sunset Ridge Park and Pacific Coast Highway, Talbot Regional Park, and the Santa Ana River Trail. Loop trails will provide outdoor hiking opportunities that afford visitors short and long routes to experience the natural beauty of the Pacific Ocean, expansive views of Orange County's coastline, and close-up access to habitats that are teeming with butterflies, birds, lizards, and small animals such as raccoon and opossum. Eventually, we anticipate the preserve will be open 7 days a week, from dawn to dusk. MRCA rangers will provide regular patrols to maintain public safety and follow preserve rules. Periodic weather closures may occur when trails are saturated and muddy. The public access plan includes shared use areas where organized public and tribal events may co-occur. In a phased rollout, a series of overlooks will be developed. Overlooks may remain primitive or be transformed into elevated viewing with seating for the public to linger and contemplate the scenery, habitat, and wildlife. This plan respects the site constraints that may limit public access to portions of the preserve, including breeding areas for sensitive species, mitigation lands, unstable bluffs, and existing utilities and easements. I'll now pass this presentation to Craig Frampton with Moffitt and Nickel.
A coastal resiliency strategy is a planning process that considers the effects of future sea level rise on resources within the lowlands at Randall Preserve. It involves identifying the risk and vulnerabilities, developing and prioritizing plans that reduce those risks, implementing the plans, then monitoring the plans to see how they perform over time, and modifying them if necessary. The process uses hydrology modeling and mapping tools to assess potential flooding of existing site conditions and the vulnerability of the lowlands to elevated sea levels with and without storm flows from the Santa Ana River. After the risks have been identified, adaptation plans are integrated into the resilience strategy. The vulnerability study for the preserve identified site features within the lowlands at risk under low and intermediate management activities that work with existing terrain elevations. Additional sea level rise analysis and mapping was used to assess risk of future high-touch management activities involving the creation of new salt marsh and habitat areas. The risk areas were identified for specific lowland preserve features, including created salt marsh and ecological resources, public trails, and operational areas. Then a coastal resiliency strategy was developed that integrated protective measures into the project design to avoid the effects of sea level rise. A variety of adaptation options were explored and evaluated based on their feasibility and their appropriateness for the preserve. And then recommendations were made as part of the resiliency planning. The last step in the process includes selecting and implementing adaptation plans that can be implemented soon or in future phases, then monitoring the effectiveness of those plans. The conservation and restoration of Randall Preserve has been of intense interest by many partner government agencies, including agencies that fund land acquisition. Management activities may be subject to local, state, and federal environmental regulations. These agencies provide critical oversight and an oversight role to address regulatory requirements as Randall Preserve is managed for public access and for habitat preservation. I'll now pass this presentation back to Jason Jackson.
Thank you, Craig. We've come a long way from the preservation of the land in 2022. A lot of time was spent researching, mapping, modeling, and surveying the property and its species, habitats, and hydrology. Plans were released in the evening of May 14th and include more than 60 days for a public comment period. We need to hear from you. Please submit your comments by 5 p.m. Pacific Daylight Time, Monday, July 14th, 2025. To that end, we encourage you to visit randallpreserve.org/plans to download the draft plans. Community members are encouraged to get involved. Your input today is important to shape the future of the Randall Preserve. There are a number of ways in which you can comment. Public comments can be accessed through the preservation website at randallpreserve.org. From the website, you can sign up to receive the newsletter and event notifications to submit comments directly. Comments may be emailed at hello@randallpreserve.org. Letters may be submitted through the postal service. And finally, we encourage you to attend any or all of our in-person open house meetings, which are scheduled through June 21st. There you can submit a written comment. If it's easier, you can also use your mobile phone camera and scan the QR code on screen to submit your comments and questions. I'll give you a quick minute before we advance if you'd like to use this feature. Okay. This concludes our formal presentation. Thank you for your attention and your time today.